Hi everyone. I wanted to come on here and share my mother's testimony. She was prompted by the Lord to put it together and I am going to read it out. I invite you all to come on this journey with me. This testimony will be done in parts and there may be breaks in between because there's some things that cannot be revealed until later on. So stay tuned. My mother's name is Diane Stowell, and here's her testimony. She starts with scripture. Hebrews chapter 9, verses 15 through 17. And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first amendment, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead, otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. And she begins. I posted my testimony on Facebook on the evening of October 4th, 2019. My brother John, who lives in Bristol, England, called me the next day and told me a little bit about our heritage, which he received from my mother and her great aunt. While my mother was giving birth to him, she had died on the table, but she was brought back. Many times my mother told us of her near-death experience, which hardly anyone would believe. She said she saw a light. She followed it into a beautiful church with very high ceilings. She met St. Peter, and he had the book of life. He found her name, and he told her that it wasn't her time. She was also told that our family are descendants of the house of David, Jerusalem and Israel. She didn't want to go back, but was pushed back and woke up while giving birth to my brother John. He told me that my grandmother had Jewish descendants from Jerusalem, Israel. I believe that the Lord wanted me to know this. And here's a little bit more about my life. I was born in a very poor family with 2 younger brothers and a baby sister. My parents had us baptized Catholic and sent us to religious instructions in church. Here is an account of what I encountered for the first time from the spirit world. I was 6 years old and we were living in these apartments in upper state New York. We used to run out to play using the stairs instead of the elevator. We lived on the 4th floor. One day I started to run down the stairs and stopped instantly in my tracks around the 2nd step. I froze. I actually saw a spirit of an older woman. I described it as looking like she was drawn on the wall in chalk, but she moved. She proceeded through the 3rd floor door. I was scared and told my parents, but they didn't believe me. They told me to go out and play. I sat next to the door and shook. I didn't want to go anywhere. Later on, my mom had found out that a grown woman told her that I wasn't making it up. She saw it too and followed it to the 9th floor when it disappeared off the roof, or to the roof. My mom told the priest about it. I was told to make the sign of the cross if I ever seen anything again. One night, the hallway light was on next to my bedroom. After that incident, I kept the covers over my head. Even with the light in our hallway, I woke up and saw a white shadow walking towards my parents' room. I've never forgotten what I saw. When I was 7 years old, I made my first communion. I was so afraid to sin. I fell one time and scraped my knees and thought I had sinned. But I slowly stopped going to church around 10 years old because my parents weren't going, so I didn't want to go. As I got older, I had more and more responsibilities given to me. I had to watch my siblings when I went outside, clean the house, iron, cook, and babysit them. I hardly ever was allowed outside to be with friends or anything like that. This all affected my life when I became a teenager. I started cutting school with my friend Alice. I learned my mother's handwriting and started writing my own notes. Alice and I started drinking. We were 14 to 15 years of age. We hung around downtown and also with male friends of hers. One time we decided to take a ride home with 2 men hanging around downtown. She went her way and I went my way. But the man I was with didn't take me home. He took me to a secluded area. I was scared of him, but was able to talk him into taking me home by telling him my last name. He had the same last name but spelled differently. He thought we could possibly be related. I never told my parents because I didn't want to get punished for cutting school. I'm pretty sure God was with me then. I finally got caught cutting school. I was beat pretty bad. Somewhere along the line, Alice and I tried to run away, but we weren't successful. We got caught the next day at a park. As time went on, I finished high school. I decided to figure out a way to leave home. I decided to join the U.S. Air Force. I was so happy to leave. I went on the airplane with 7 guys. I was so ecstatic. I was only 18 years old. I went to San Antonio, Texas for 6 weeks of basic training. I knew I could get through it without a problem. It was easier than living home. I saw the guys during that time when we were allowed to go to an officers' club. Their heads were bald as an eagle, but we had a good time. After basic training, I was sent to Biloxi, Mississippi to attend a technical training school. This was all during the Vietnam era. As long as we were there for our classes, we could go out anytime. I loved it. Eventually, though, I was riding a bicycle and I met a guy. He was an Air Force brat, meaning his father was in the Air Force, but he was scheduled to go into the Marine Corps. I was 18 and he was also 18 at the time. I was able to choose 3 places to go for my next base. I chose 2 places in the South and put New York State last. I ended up in New York State in the smallest base in the Air Force. I was so mad. There was a women's dorm and a men's dorm, but not much of anything else. Soon after, my boyfriend and I got married because I didn't want to leave for my next assignment, which was in Syracuse, New York, without him. Eventually, he would hitchhike or anything to come see me, and he even went to my parents' house. He was not very welcome there. They were the type that didn't like his long hair, the way he dressed or anything, even though he was in style with most young people at the time, the 70s. After a while, I was able to get released with an honorable discharge from the Air Force because my new husband was stationed more than 50 miles away. I stayed with him at a Marine Corps base in the Carolinas for a little while. Eventually, he went overseas and I went back to Biloxi, Mississippi to live in an apartment with his sister. It was cool. We were across the main drag of the Gulf of Mexico. The landlady had a mansion and she had like a dirt road on the side of the mansion, which led to a log cabin and a few other places. They were like in a circle. My husband's sister and I smoked pot morning, noon, and night as long as we were awake. We didn't watch television at all. We didn't even know that one of the presidents had died. We just listened to music. Eventually, I started to cheat on my husband and finally left to get a divorce while he was away. I became a wild child, so to speak. I had a guy friend who lived in Camden, New York. He and I hitchhiked from Mississippi to his house, and I took a bus home from there so my parents wouldn't know what we had done. Eventually, I got my divorce. I regretted for the rest of my life what I had did. It seemed like my life went haywire. Eventually, I got married again to an abuser. My life was in turmoil. My new husband even beat me. Soon, that marriage ended. It seemed like everyone else I went with didn't stay long. I finally got in a 7-year relationship with another abuser. I had this feeling that I was being punished by God for what I did to my first husband. During a lot of my abuse, I would cry and be mad at God. I would turn his pictures over when I was mad and said some terrible things to him. I was so angry. I asked why I was born, just to be beat up. I was hurting. Eventually, I would go back and pray and say I was sorry. Sometime during the time of my abuse and loneliness, I was lying down, and while crying my eyes out, I opened my eyes and saw another spirit. I saw a man with a plaid shirt. I was frightened and he went away. I never seen his face. I was too scared to look. Now finally I have a new husband, surely not chosen by God. He has his problems, but I figured he'd never hit me. so I stayed with him. I told myself I would never get a divorce again, so for years and years I worked and fought with him about his problem. I went back to church when I had children. I pray a lot and have been a faithful Catholic for years. I look for ways to pray to the Lord. I guess you could say I prayed the rosary and did the 9-day novenas, etc. Eventually, I discovered the Chaplet of Mercy, so I started praying the Chaplet of Mercy regularly. And wow, I prayed for my children to be able to have more grandchildren for me. I prayed for my son and my daughter to be able to have their sons. They already had girls and desired a boy. Well, my daughter finally had a boy after 2 girls. The doctor's office told her that she was having another girl at first, but that changed, and now she has her son. My son and his wife already had 2 girls. His wife was not ready for more children. My son gave in to the fact of not having any more either. I prayed hard for him because I knew he really wanted a son of his own so bad. I knew he was a good father. I said to God, this might require a miracle. She wasn't feeling good and went to the doctor. The doctor changed her medication, but that didn't work either. So as time went on, my son called me to tell me to sit down, that they just found out that his wife was 5 months along, and he was able to tell us what they were having, a boy. I consider him a miracle child. No one in our family could believe it. When he was born, he was so healthy. One other time I was praying the chaplet and I looked at the picture of Jesus, Prince of Peace. I told him that when I leave this world, I wanted him to come and get me, and that I didn't want to be with anyone in heaven but him. So I didn't even know there was such a thing as hearing his voice. Sadly, my son and daughter lost their father in May of 2018. She was taking a picture before the service of a cloud shaped as a dove. Her daughter took the picture while she was driving. It pretty much matched his mass card from the services. She was watching out her window at that time, and there was a red cardinal that appeared in her window for days. When you see a cardinal, it is said to mean messengers of the spirit world. As time went on, I went to confession. The priest there asked me if I had ever read the Bible. I said no. I looked at my Bible with over 1,000 pages, hesitant, but said, okay, I'll read it. I had plenty of time, so I planned to read it before a year was up, which was in 2018. I've read the Bible from front to back. Can't say I always understood it, though. I went a couple months after that and felt like I was missing it, like it was a person. So I decided to start rereading it. It was plenty hard to understand at times. Eventually, I started listening to the prophets on YouTube. Mind you, I complained when my kids were on their phones on YouTube, when they were visiting. I don't even know how I got started. I always had an interest in God, though. I have DVDs about God. They were actually my favorite movies, but horror movies were also my favorite, so I went from one extreme to the other. But I started getting addicted to YouTube. I wanted to listen to Jesus and his Father in the words they were giving to the prophets. I didn't even know what a prophet was, but I know now from reading the Bible, I didn't even know they had prophets in this day and age. And that is the end of part 1. Thank you for listening.